As you can see, the temple is still very much in process. Of course, it's always in process, but it's not usually so obviously in process. Right on cue. If I could have some kind of a water or something too, I'd be grateful. So here we are in this process. And what a beautiful ceremony to have all the kids and everybody come up and make things fresh and new. It's a part of most traditions in the world use water, they use fire in different ways. In Buddhism, when we use water, the words are always, things are fresh and new. Fresh and new. Things are fresh and new. And this freshness and this newness is something that comes, thank you, brother, it comes from our practice. Of course, actually that freshness and newness is self-arising constantly. But for us to clue into it, and to have it actually make any difference, like on our end of the dial, we need to tune into it. And so we read these words together. Absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light, recall this. In the dark, recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, truly there is nothing but this. Now for those who are newer to the whole thing, all these words, Buddha and Dharma and everything, they can be not helpful because we don't know what they really mean. It's easy to think that we're talking about some external thing somewhere. But when we talk about absorbing world sounds, awakening a Buddha right here, when we're all in the middle of making a bunch of sound together, who's the recipient of this sound? Who's the bringer forth of the sound? Who's the Buddha that gets awakened? It's us. It's not the little statue. It's a nice little statue. Actually, it's an interesting story. This particular statue, when we first moved here, there was a fellow named Ken Pabava Bender. And Mr. Bender practiced Aikido with me. He was one of the very first people to walk through the doors of this dojo. And he carried a wound in that he was deeply Buddhist in his orientation, and there was no way for that to be met. His co-workers, his family, the community. So he did what most people used to do, and he would dutifully trek all the way up to Ann Arbor or some other place to try to plug in. But, you know, that's hard to do. And also not quite the right fit. And so ending up alone. Not quite sure if he's crazy or not. And of course he is. But you need friends to encourage you in this craziness and make your craziness well met. And let your craziness really grow and blossom and become the beautiful Buddha that it is. Witness me. And so Ken, when we started, he gave us that Buddha image. And he said, finally, this has a home, a place to be. Now, as it happens to be, Ken, I guess he was in his mid-50s or late 50s somewhere, early 60s at the most, but he passed away of a heart attack. Before this Sangha really became what it's becoming. And so, as it happened to be, it was the first funeral I ever officiated at. And he wanted to be buried in his vestments of practice. And so I went to the morgue, and that was my first time in that scene, you know. but it was the wishes of his family, and clearly him in some way, to be in the vestments of practice. And so we did that process, and we laid him to rest. And at last, in some kind of a way, there was some meeting, some way of being recognized, some way of being held. And so this Buddha image is very happy today to have all these kids and all the families and all the community not be afraid to come up and make things fresh and new. And so I think Ken is happy.
It's interesting because he was with me the whole time.
Is that so?
Yes.
Ooh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it until just this. Yeah. I think it's with me in some ways too because of the transition. No one really has a great blueprint from beginning to end of how this experiment is going to go. It's something that we co-create from the very first steps into this one. And those steps can be scary, but it's also kind of sexy. It's kind of juicy. It's exciting, you know. It's a lot more interesting than just wondering what's going on with the game and sitting around and that's it. What an adventure. But really, if this adventure does not serve to awaken Buddha, then the opportunity that it's really about has been missed. Right? Everything that goes on in the temple, with the noisy kids and the camera that falls and this refrigerator that kicks on and the cushion that's too lumpy, it's actually all for your practice. It's the first truth of the way. Everything is not quite right. How do we go about living a life of wisdom and compassion in the middle of that? How do we see through that to realize the perfection and not be afraid? Mostly not be afraid of ourselves. This awakened one, which is you, is the source of compassion. Truly, if you don't create it, it doesn't exist. Each of us must call into being this compassionate heart. We must awaken it and live from it. And when we trip, as we will, the job is to get up. We know where the compass points. We know which way compassion is. Exactly what steps you take, it's up to you. It's up to me. You're a big person. But it must be moving towards compassion, from compassion, as compassion. And two, this Buddha, which is you, receives only compassion. There is nothing else. Really? You mean even that is compassion? It doesn't feel like compassion. That diagnosis. That job that leaves you. The relationship that implodes. But in some way, if you can open your heart to the situation, open yourself to what's really going on, it's ceaseless giving. It's a bounty of experience. And some experiences are preferable to others, I know. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That means the teachings, that means reality itself, that means the community of friends is just compassion. How do we get that to actually show up? How do we create harmony in our practice? Harmony in ourselves, harmony in the community. This is Genjo koan. This is the koan of everyday life. This is the koan of keeping your mind on target while there's kids pulling you away at every instant behind you, wondering if they're making bunny ears behind you. And trying to not cough through the whole thing. Thus, the pure heart always rejoices. It's one of the particular qualities of my teacher. The many teachers that I've known, there is this rejoicing quality, even in the furnace, even amongst the muck. Somehow there's this glimmer, even when there's tear-filled eyes, because that's a person who's really there. So many times we look to our practice and we judge it to be insufficient, and then we start to assign blame. And one style of blame making is to say, it's me. I'm not good enough. I'm not getting it. I can't hang. I just don't understand. And that's like a meta distraction. James Ford calls it that. He calls it like a meta distraction. You're sitting there trying to sit, right? And then you notice that you're pulled into some scenario or something, and then the blame machine starts cranking out its perfected story of how unworthy we are. Or the blame goes outward. It's the environment. The kids are too loud, the incense smells, the lights are too dark, or the lights are too light, or whatever. I can't concentrate with that melody, you know. So we just look at the outside environment for blame. Please notice when we do this, and please spare yourself the anguish, and simply let go and return to your practice. Just realign and wash the dish. Take care of the lawn. Take care of this breath. Please spend no energy in your practice playing the blame game. It's probably one of the fastest ways to increase the quality of suffering in your life, is to really dig into blame. And you know, in too broad a stroke, it tends to fall along gender lines. Sometimes guys tend to be like, yeah. Not all the time. Other people, women tend to, of course, we both can fall prey to all diseases. But it's a thing we do. And the Buddha says, drop it. Just sit. Just do the dishes. Just have the conversation. Just take care of your practice. Take care of this moment. Thus, the pure heart always rejoices. In the light, recall this. In the dark, recall this. And the darkness is there. We all know it. But even in the dark, recall this compassionate heart. Zazen is a practice that can go with you all the way into the depths of hell, and can go all the way up into the heaven realms. Freely. You can practice in any realm. Which realm? Sounds pretty good to me. Moment after moment, this true heart arises. And really it does. Ha. Right on cue. Moment after moment, time after time. Truly, there is nothing but this.